All right. Well, welcome everybody to the From Busy to Rich podcast, a podcast designed to help inspire advisors to increase profitability and quality of life, but not just for themselves, for all those that they serve. I am hosting solo today. Justin's not here with us. And so I get to say anything I want. We can go a lot of places. He's not there to keep us in. And I've got a wild guest on here today as well. So a really good friend of mine and mentor and just a wonderful thinker and who has helped thousands and thousands of people all across the world with his messages, his leadership, his impact and influence, and has created a magnificent organization that I'm going to let him talk about in a second. But I am just super happy to have on the show Pastor Rob Koch. Rob, thanks for being on today.
Wes, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Awesome. Well, I'd love it if you would start just by giving people kind of a snapshot in to the way things are today, to kind of a day in the life of you, the way the organization works, and then I want to go back in time a little bit because it wasn't always this way. It wasn't always the way it is, and then talk about some fun things in between.
Okay. Well, I pastor Shoreline Church here in Austin, Texas. We have a broadcast campus on the north side of town that has a sanctuary capacity of about 5,000 people. We have a south campus that has an auditorium space for 500. We have a very robust online congregation that views from literally almost every state in the union and also places around the world. So we're very excited about that. Underneath the umbrella of our local ministry here at Shoreline, we also have a early learning center that has about 150 students that are a part of it. So on an average Sunday, we are probably reaching upwards towards 10,000 people with all the folks on campus, and we have a Shoreline Behind Bars, which is our services going to those who are incarcerated in the state of Texas, which has over 20,000 views every single week. And so we're really excited about that outreach as well. And then in the network of Shoreline, there is Shoreline Dallas, which is one of the largest churches in the country. That is a church that's growing just amazing. We have a church in Tulsa. We have Shoreline Poland. We have Shoreline Guatemala that is outside of that's a direct outreach from Shoreline Dallas. So yeah, lots of things are going on, and we're just super blessed to be a part of that. So if you're, I think you would ask me specifically what a day looks like or what my week looks like. Mondays and Tuesdays are completely dedicated to the leadership / business side of church life. And so our meetings normally on Tuesdays start right at the beginning of the day and go all the way through, one just right after another. We try to keep those very tight and agenda driven. Mondays is like a project day for me. So I'm working on things related to those meetings on Tuesday, making sure that we're moving the ball forward in all of the different areas that are important priorities to us. And then Wednesdays, like today is the day that we're recording this. This is a Wednesday.
This is the highlight of your week too, right?
Yeah, it is. Okay, talking awesome with you is a joy, no doubt. But Wednesdays and Thursdays for me are about sermon prep. And so for us to communicate as effectively as we possibly can to our congregation, I take that responsibility very seriously. And so we dedicate those days to both research and sermon planning and actually, writing the sermons. And so that's kind of what my week looks like. Friday is my day off. Saturday is a day that my wife and I call our Sabbath rest day. So we try to turn off our phones and disconnect from the world. And then Sunday, of course, is an extremely busy day for us.
So you mean you just don't just show up to work one day a week on Sunday?
I joke about that from time to time, but no, It's not it. It's an extremely busy but very rewarding life.
So I want to talk about two things real quick. I want to talk about the massive amount of volunteer that you have to have, but first, you also have a massive amount of people that actually get paychecks, and so talk to me about that structure that you are today.
Um, so I think both by spiritual conviction and then also by practical necessity, churches are very, very committed to working with volunteers and raising up volunteers. And so the whole process of cultivating a passion in the hearts of people to commit their time, their talent, their treasure to help accomplish the mission of the church is critical. It's like foundational. And so in our church family, we probably have somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 unique individuals. Some of them maybe aren't quite as involved. I think that core group that really makes Shoreline happen on a week-to-week basis is probably somewhere closer to 800 committed volunteers that we value beyond anything I can put into words. In fact, not this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday is our huge kind of appreciation Sunday for all of our volunteers. And we just make a big deal about celebrating them, honoring them, and appreciating what they bring to the table. So we kind of have the philosophy that one of the primary responsibilities of every staff member is to build teams. So we don't hire staff to accomplish ministry, although there is always some element of that. We really see our staff as the builder of teams to accomplish the goals and mission of our church. And so if you're not good at building teams, you're not going to last long in our environment. And how that plays out is empowering volunteers to be teachers and caregivers and small group leaders and our tech department, which we do need some very highly skilled staff members who know how to hang lights and program, our services, and both from the sound and lighting and video technology. That's pretty highly skilled areas of expertise. But even in those areas, we have a robust team of volunteers that learn how to operate cameras and learn how to run our services. In fact, people might be surprised, even though we have literally thousands and thousands of people that watch our services every week online. If you were to go up to the control room, it's run by like teenagers and early 20 young people who love Jesus and have been trained to help make a difference. It's pretty amazing. On staff, we try to keep our staff as tight as we can. On the early learning side, of course, a lot of that is driven by state regulations and teacher to classroom ratios, and so there's no skimping there. There's just set rules for how that all unfolds. But on the church side, we have about 45 full-time employees and then a few part-time employees and contract employees that makes up the staff of what we do.
Yeah, I love that. Something that makes me think about, because I think this gets overlooked in for most of the audience listening today. They're running financial planning practices, a variety of different stages, and they have people that are on their payroll. But what I think gets overlooked a lot is, whether they realize it or not, they're working with a lot of volunteers as well. Maybe not in the traditional sense that they would think of as like that are helping out with the work and the mission of the church, but they are key components in helping them fulfill. And one of the things that we talk a lot about is the difference between like an employee and a team member. An employee has a what and a how. It's like, here's what you need to do and how you need to go do it. And a team member has a responsibility to empower the people around them to forward the mission and the vision of the organization. And what I think, there's so many corollaries here. that when you guys are experts with kind of empowering the volunteer force to enhance and drive forward the mission and the vision, it works the same way on the financial side because we're dealing with vendors and idea partners and people that need to process paperwork that are not getting checks from us. They're getting checks from somewhere else. But how we work with them is critically important, and how we appreciate them is critically important to how well they play that role on our team. So I've learned personally from you and from just watching how well Shoreline does this, that you can get people to do so many things and give so much energy on your behalf for your energy, even though you're not writing them a check, in how you treat them, how you empower them, and how you appreciate them. So I think if you're an advisor listening today, you would do well to really study the models of great churches to empower your own volunteer labor force that's out there, because you all have one and some of you aren't aware of it. And you might not be treating them in a way that makes them, do they feel grateful? Do they like seeing your call, your request? Or are they going, oh gosh, here it comes again? So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, one of the things that we do, a couple of thoughts actually, but when you were sharing, I was thinking about the fact that at Shoreline, we don't just celebrate our volunteers once a year. We actually try to do it every single Sunday. So right before I preach my message, when I get up to the pulpit, we have a moment where we throw up on the screen a volunteer that we're appreciating that Sunday. And so they might work in the tech area, the children's ministry, the cafe, the parking ministry, greeters or ushers or wherever they're serving on that particular Sunday. And we just brag on them, show them their picture. Everybody has an opportunity to clap. So we keep what that does for the thousands of people that are attending our services. It says we value volunteers, and it might, provide an inspiration for someone who isn't using their gifts and talents to help make a difference, to get off the sidelines and get into the game. So that's a big part of what we do. The second thing that I was thinking about in terms of how important it is to cultivate the relationship that you have with your volunteers, I think it's really, of course, we have the added advantage that the scripture speaks so much about serving one another and loving one another. And so we tap into those biblical principles that help to educate our congregation on the importance of it. But we always feel like it's in their best interest to live a significant life, to be a part of helping and making a difference. If somebody lives their whole life and everything about their life is about them, so they consume 100% of their finances, 100% of their disposable time, 100% of their gifts and talents go to making their own lives better, that's not a very significant life. And I think that people are richer, not even just richer emotionally. I think that they're richer even in their careers and richer even in their career path when they take a portion of their time to make a difference in the lives of other people. Now, it's our responsibility as leaders, of course, to monitor that and to make sure that somebody isn't overcommitted. And that's just as much an important part of leadership as being undercommitted. We try to hit that sweet spot in people's lives where they are, reasonably challenged, but not excessively challenged. That they can see themselves doing this, being happy, not feeling guilty or manipulated. That we really care about them. And I think it's also, you talked a little bit about the what and the how, but I think it's equally as important to kind of dig into the why.
Yeah.
And to really capture the whys. And we try to do that with stories. We try to do that with testimonies. We try to make sure that everybody has their real why solidified, because that's what provides the motivation.
That's awesome. And as I think about, for those of you listening today, let's just think about some real practical ways that this plays itself out in our organization. So I'll give you some examples. Kara in our organization, she's responsible for, we call her the service liaison. So she's responsible for anything new business processing, processing existing business, making sure things happen on time in a client's life cycle, whether that's a policy paid, an address changed, a new policy being put in place, a new investment account being set up. And one of the things that she is so good at is letting the people around her that are a part of our extended team that not getting paychecks from us know how critical they are and how appreciative she is. So, for example, she will let a person know, hey, I want to let you know that our mission here is to increase people's profitability and quality of life. And you handled this situation so masterfully that we were able to get this in place for this client. They had a great experience on it. It was in a timely manner. And I just want to let you know how much I appreciate you doing that. Now, I guarantee you, most people, most advisor networks out there that are doing this, they're not getting that appreciation. And as you said, they might not be getting that from the place they're currently employed. They might not be getting that from home or the life they're living. But boy, you can add such meaning and relevance to their life by letting them know, here's what we're doing, and here's the part that you're playing in that, and how meaningful it is to us. And Rob, they will bend over backwards for Kara. Everybody loves Kara in that extended network. And it doesn't take a lot, it just takes being aware.
Yeah.
And it takes building processes to remind yourself that, hey, and so on your lists out there, when you're listening, who do you need to thank today? And maybe right now you pause this podcast and you just send a note or make a phone call and let them know, hey, I want to let you know how much I appreciate the work. Here's the work we're doing, which we think is great. And here's the role you play in that. So I think it's awesome. And you guys clearly do a masterful job and continue to iterate and really give intentional thought around how are we developing that. I'd like to switch gears a little bit because you have a massive organization, a big team, and do a ton of good all across the world. And I think sometimes people, when they observe a person in the snapshot of their life, can go, well, that's so far away from me. Gosh, if he had to start with what I started with, what am I possible? So I know you had just a blank check and a large congregation when you started. No, you didn't have any of those things. So I'd like you to go back and maybe talk about where this all began.
It's a really fascinating story, and I hope your listening audience will forgive me for just taking a moment to express my extreme gratitude to the Lord for His graciously allowing for me to be on this journey. Because for me to take credit for it or to somehow feel like it's all about me would just it would just be so far from the truth.
Sure, sure.
And even when I go back to the beginning, we tell this story from time to time, and I'm still amazed at what God has done. But we actually moved to Austin. I was involved with doing some missionary work for a number of years when I graduated from school, and then when Laura and I, my wife and I, got engaged, she was graduating from chiropractic college, and so she was going to start her practice as a doctor. Her dad's a chiropractor, her brother's a chiropractor, and so it kind of runs in the family. We felt called to start a church at the same time. So we're starting everything from scratch, business side. Yeah.
Starting a business and starting a church.
Yeah. And so we,
did you have kids yet?
No kids, freshly married, 26 years old. We moved to Austin, Texas to start both at the same time. And there is no small group. There's no Bible study. There's no church saying, hey, we would love for you to come and be our pastor. We literally started from scratch. The very first person that came to our church was selling water treatment systems in our neighborhood. So he knocked on our door and he heard the Christian music playing, on the radio. And he said, are you guys Christians? I said, yeah, in fact, we're starting a church. And he said, well, I'm new to town. I'm, kind of doing this water treatment thing. And he became our head usher. I mean, nice. Literally, that's how the church started. And we knocked on hundreds of doors without a whole lot of success. But we still were just getting the word out there. And in that first year, we started meeting in my father-in-law's waiting room. Like I mentioned, he was a doctor here in town. And so it would have a capacity for 10 people. I still remember the Sunday we had standing room only. It was awesome. And we had our first official service after about 6 or 8 months or so of just kind of having small Bible studies. at the Holiday Inn. I don't think it's even there anymore. It's a different name, at 183 in Mopac. And
Nice.
we rented out the ballroom there, and, we would have to pay $75 a week to rent the ballroom. Sometimes we would take in $25 in an offering. It wasn't, a huge, business success. We dipped into savings to try to keep things afloat. But then, things began to take on some momentum. And even though it was harder than I thought, and it took longer than I thought, slowly but surely, after about that first year, things began to really move. And then we rented an old Presbyterian church, and the church grew to about 500. And then we rented an old grocery store, and the church grew, to about 2,000. And then we bought some land in North Austin and built that 5,000 seat sanctuary. We've been, a few years later, bought the space that we have down south. And so, yeah, it was very slow at first. But we've seen God's faithful hand as we've been on this journey.
I love that. And because it is not unlike a lot of the ways people listening today felt when they started this business, including myself. I was 24. I was going to your church at that time. So doing a lot of praying, deep praying, because I needed this thing to work. And there was no money and no people. And there was an idea. And I think one thing that I've observed in you, and you might not language it this way, but I would wrap it in this, because it's of successful people that drive a worthy cause forward. There is like a savage persistence of continuing to drive things forward. And when you hit a roadblock or things don't work out like you thought, as is inevitable, that we don't have a ability to see the future. But we can decide that, hey, no matter what, I'm going to continue to iterate this, and I'm going to continue to drive it forward. So thoughts around that?
So I still, remember back in the day. Now we have team members that really help to facilitate this process. But when you're, starting a church, literally, I don't have hardly any musical ability, but I can play, D, C, and G on the guitar.
I've heard
my wife.
Yeah,
Yes. I led the worship. My wife, kind of helped to make sure that the words were put on a screen. We did the accounting. We didn't have children's church because we didn't have any children in our church. And then one Sunday, a couple showed up and they had a child. So then Laura became the children's, it wasn't even children's pastor. It was child pastor, because there was only one, So, so you end up doing everything at the beginning. And this is kind of one of the things that I think is really, really important to understand. In those beginning months, we couldn't sell what is. If somebody comes to Shoreline today, there is a huge credibility investment just made in the atmosphere that they're walking into. They walk into a sanctuary. There's greeters at the front door. There's thousands of people attending. They're already leaning into the credibility of all of this stuff that's going on. But when you're starting, you don't have any of that. And so you have to sell the future. That's where your credibility is. And so every single person that would visit our church, we would meet with them one-on-one. We'd have lunch with them. We'd follow up, and we knew that we had a credibility deficit in their initial experience with us. So we had to build credibility by selling the future. And we had to treat even those beginning days as if there were thousands of people there. We had to live out with confidence and boldness the vision that God had given to us, even though there wasn't much to show for it. And it's surprising how contagious that is. When people can hear it in your voice and see it in your passion, and you can articulate the vision of the future, that goes a long way to overcoming some of the disadvantages that you have from, facilities and history and experience. But that's all we had. And so that's what we used. And then, you start thinking about, those beginning staff hires, and how that all unfolds. And I was just going through this conversation with my son-in-law because he's starting a new business. You've kind of been involved with that. And by the way, for your listeners, Wes has been my financial advisor now for many, many years, and he lives what he talks about. And so this conversation isn't just about the fact that he's been a part of our church world. This is, a long-term relationship that I've benefited from your financial wisdom and counsel, and you have blessed our family in so many different ways. But the that those first couple of hires are really, really important. I divide, the people that work on staff at Shoreline into two different categories. You've got the generators of ministry and you have the responders to ministry. And both of them are important, but you got to make sure you get the order correct. You got to make sure that you're hiring initially on the generation side of ministry. So the first people that you bring in, you can be the most well-oiled organizational, team, but if you don't have any clients,
Yeah,
and
right.
what's the deal? So you gotta make sure that you're always on the leading edge. So for instance, with Fredlin, he's starting this flooring company and we're so excited for him. It's such a great thing. But, he's trying to balance, his first couple of hires. He needs an office manager to be able to do appointments and be able to schedule and make sure that everything's running smoothly. But he also needs salespeople and installers and people that are going to actually do the work of in making sure that the sales of flooring are actually happening. And so it's like almost reliving our own start,
Yeah.
just kind of giving counsel and guidance to this process to make sure you have the balance right. Both are important, but you have to make sure that you're hiring the right people at the right time so that you don't run out of money. But then also, as you're generating income, you want to make sure you have the right support in place so that you're doing a good job with what you have. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense and is very applicable because one of the things we teach a lot, and you guys listening know I talk about this constantly, is your highest and best use is to be generating movement for your clients. And the problem or the challenge or the tension, I would say, that you got to manage with that is when it's just you and you are the team, you're doing everything. And probably some of it not very well, and probably some of it you hate, and it just is not it's necessary, it's required. But one of the biggest game changers that we see is it's like when somebody's riding a 1-speed bike and at first they can just pedal faster and they can make more progress. Eventually on that 1-speed bike, you can only pedal so fast and you're just not going to gain any more progress. You got to upgrade by adding another gear. And that's where you bring in that critical next hire, right? That's like, of all the things that are on my list of things that in my lead advisor capacity, if I could take this off, that would free up that time and energy to go do what is the highest and best use for me. It is a game changer. And for me personally, I remember when I hired Stephanie way back in the day, she's been with us almost 2 decades now. And it was a game changer. And it's a little bit scary because also there's some identity stuff there with, well, if I pay her and I have this extra time, what if I don't do it? What if I don't actually bring in more business? What if that doesn't? And I've never, ever seen that happen with an advisor when they hire another person, because doers do, and you're going to figure out a way to redo that energy. It's just, you're going to be doing it in such a more productive place. To your point, I think being really, really skilled or really critical about what is that next one that's actually going to move the needle the most. Because again, you'd love to hire 20 people today if you could, but you can't. And because that would be, you're adding way too much belly to the airplane, and you don't have enough engine power to keep that plane flying. But man, when you can just always be thinking in terms of, all right, who needs to be the next person to free me up to generate more? And you will, and you need to hitchhike on our faith for a minute that this works. And if you're holding off, because again, I've got hundreds and hundreds of advisor stories building their practices that they held off, And while the best time to have hired somebody was going to be 3 years ago, the next best time is today. Is you need to get that person in there, because you will do the work and you will create more, and you'll be like, why didn't I do this sooner?
Mhm. You know, one of the ways that that applies in a ministry setting, and I think it is so transferable. One of the first seminars that I ever went to that was, describing the whole process of building a church. They talked about the difference between farmers and ranchers. And I don't know if this totally applies, but just kind of go with me a little bit. But the idea is that a farmer is like, this family farm. He's the sole proprietor. He's going to till the soil and plant the seed and do all of that. The rancher is kind of, the person who expands beyond being the sole proprietor to, organizing all kinds of things that need to happen in order for the ranch to be successful. And the reason why that was so important is because 95% of the churches in the United States of America are 100 people or less. And so, and they are pastored by very sincere people who see that their role is to be the primary provider of spiritual care for the people in their congregation. Well, one person can only be the primary provider of spiritual care for about 100 people.
Yeah.
And so that's why churches don't grow. Churches will grow when the pastor makes the shift from being the primary provider of spiritual care to being the organizer of spiritual care. Then it takes the limits out of all of the growth opportunities. And there's a lot more efficiency if you think about it. If you had, if you had 100 churches, all with 100 people, right?
Yeah.
And you had 100 buildings and 100 pastors and 100, support staff to make all of that happen. You can actually have one building,
Yeah.
with all of those people, and you'd have half the staff and much more effectiveness and efficiency if you just saw yourself organizing, the care. So anyway, I know it's a step of faith, but I think it's the paradigm shift that people need to make from being the organizer, from being the sole proprietor.
Love it. Love it. It's the difference between building a business and owning a job. I
Yeah.
really think that. And these are great takeaways. Just as we wrap up here, Pastor Rob, any last thoughts as you think back on all those things, the iterations that you've been through to have built the current state of the organization today? If you could just go back in time outside of what we've already talked about and tell yourself, hey, also just remember this or think about this, what comes to mind?
Um, Maybe a little bit of a surprise word, but I would say authenticity. Um, that that as a leader, as a business owner, as someone who's wanting to build a business, if you are authentic, just thinking about the financial services, I've never walked away from conversations with you where I didn't feel like you had my best interest in mind. You weren't making decisions that were best for you. You were making decisions that were best for me. And, I don't know how many times you talked me off the ledge. I was about ready to make a foolish, side investment with a friend, and it turned out to be a nightmare, and so glad that your wisdom, but it wasn't motivated by you wanting to keep my business. It was motivated by your experience and your desire for me to have the best at the end of my career, financial strength that I could have. And I don't think that there's anything replacing that.
Yeah.
When I think about what we do in ministry, I was talking to our staff yesterday. We had a staff chapel where, I was just, we gathered all of our staff and we just said, hey, listen, I just want you guys to remember that, the Bible says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Do you want to see God in your ministry? If you want to see the results that you're looking for, you want to see the miracles unfold. It comes from a pure heart, an undivided heart, where you serve with the best of intentions for the people that God has brought into your world. And I think if you keep that front and center, that you're never going to lose opportunity. Because I think that there's nothing wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong with being successful. But if your goal is to be successful at the expense of of the people that you serve, you're never going to win in the long run. So I don't know if that helps, but I'll just add that to the equation.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think it's a good place to wrap, because one of the things that sincere prayer I have prior to all the meetings we walk into and that we teach to is, God, help me want something for them, not from them. Help me want something for them, not from them. Because what it does is it just takes on a different atmosphere. Some things, authenticity, you sense it through the air. I really believe that. And it changes my heart, because listen, everybody, that's listening, you've got mortgages and kids and college tuition, and if your kids go to TCU like mine, you got a lot of college tuition going out right now. And certainly there's needs that you want to fulfill and things you want to accomplish, but you're at your best. And I'm at my best when I go in and just take all that out of the way and say, God, help me want something for them, not from them. And it immediately makes everything better. And the outcomes always show up. That's kind of a byproduct of being authentic and having that genuine heart for others. So I'm super appreciative for you taking the time to be on the show today. Thank you so much for your wisdom and your friendship and your mentorship along the way.
You're quite welcome. Enjoyed it, Wes.